Queria voltar um pouquinho ao assunto, os juros muito altos aqui no Brasil. Quando a gente conversa com o Banco Central, ele diz, as autoridades dizem, olha, a gente também tem o desejo de baixar a taxa de juros, que é muito alta, mas o Brasil tem um histórico complicado com inflação muito alta. Nos anos 80, a gente teve uma década perdida com a inflação muito alta, tivemos uma recessão há 10 anos para poder combater essa inflação muito alta, e o argumento deles, olha, a inflação aí está alta, a gente tem uma meta de 3%, temos que manter esse juro alto para baixar essa inflação. Se baixar o juro sem cuidado, a gente não vai descuidar da inflação e voltar ao velho problema?
The current inflation is different from normal inflation. And you've had inflation. I understand Brazil's concern about inflation, perfectly normal. But this inflation, the post-pandemic inflation, is different from the inflation that Brazil and the world has had in the past. This is mostly a supply-side inflation. The pandemic gave rise to very large shifts in demand that also contributed to the inflation, but it's not an excess of aggregate demand. The interest rate is a very blunt instrument, and it works on aggregate demand. And unfortunately, in this case, often high interest rates are counterproductive. They actually worsen the situation. Let me give you some example. So, and I'm going to talk about the United States because I know the data for the United States much better than I do the Brazilian data. But a major source of inflation in the United States is housing. If you looked at the aggregate statistics, you'd say we should have housing prices coming down. Why? Under Trump, we killed off more than 1 million Americans. When you have fewer people, demand for housing should go down. And if demand goes down, the prices should go down. What happened? The pandemic meant that people living in New York was less interesting. You couldn't leave your apartment. So people wanted to go to Southampton and to Hudson Valley, various places outside. You can't overnight increase the supply of housing. The price went up there. But in New York, the price came down, but very, very little. And the average, therefore, went up. But if you have a supply problem, like in the Hudson Valley, what do you want to do? You want to build more housing. What does raising interest rates do? Make it more difficult. So they exacerbate the problem. Let me give you another example of where the source of inflation. Chips, automobiles. In the beginning of the inflation, you could see in the data, about 1/3 of the inflation was due to automobiles. America, we knew how to produce cars. We still knew. We had our factories. What was the problem? The problem is that car companies forgot to order chips, and the chip manufacturers shifted their production elsewhere. Well, when the demand came back, the car companies put in orders. The chip companies said it's going to take us a long while. There were some other problems in the chip industry. Mm-hmm. But it was only a matter of time before the chip started coming. Was it high interest rates that led to more chip production? No. It was just time. And then car production came back, inventories built up, and car prices came down. You take the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that got oil prices up, fertilizer prices, which affected Brazil, up. Does raising interest rates solve the problem of shortage of oil? No. So the basic fact is that today's inflation is not caused by an excess of aggregate demand.
Sad.
And so what I predicted was that as market responded to the problems, prices would come down, and they have come down. I mean, not prices, but inflation rates would come down. So in the United States, we've almost achieved the 3 to 4% inflation. And I think, Brazil is doing very well, not because, let me make it clear, not because of the high interest rates of the central bank. It's doing well in spite of the high interest rates of the central bank. And inflation is coming down not because of the high interest rates. It's coming down because markets are finally responding. There's one more element I want to raise, which is related to Laura's question. One of the things that happened in the post-pandemic period was there were these supply shortages, and a lot of firms had even more market power than they do normally. We saw the market power be going up for years. Then all of a sudden, it went way up. And they saw that if they raised the prices, nobody could come in and compete because the supply chains were broken. And I'm hopeful now that that market power will be reduced as supply linkages regain. But it's very important to strengthen competition policy. And that goes back again to Laura's thing. If we got more competition, markups would go down.